going to read it, but it was for educational purpose to let them know why they was doing the ID checking 50%, and also tell them why and what the goal was. So every morning, the first week, the store manager will make sure he told each cashier this script here. And then every morning when the cashiers would come to punch in or clock in, he would tell them, remember our goal of 50% ID checking the customers using a credit and debit card. And every morning when they came in, he would tell them that, just to be honest. And if they didn't hear them well, they also put these prompts by the cash register. So if you can see here within these triangles there is the prompt that I just showed here. So that prompt is within those triangles by the cash register just to remind them, hey, check 50% of the customer's ID. So after 31 days of just being prompted to check customer's ID, we went through the withdrawal phase. After 30 days, after 30 days intervention, we did withdrawal. And withdrawal was just simply the store manager not telling the cashiers, don't check ID, remind them the 50% ID checking goal. And we also removed the prompts from the store, so nothing was there. So when the cashiers came in, they asked about the 50% ID checking goal. The store manager would say, right now, we are changing the ID checking process. When I know of the changes, I will let you know. As for right now, check customers' ID to look out for their safety. So that was the intervention store. So after the withdrawal phase, 29 days of the withdrawal phase, we ended data collection at the intervention store. So while all that was happening at the intervention store, at the control store, we just observed their natural behavior. So it lasted the same length as the study at the intervention store, but they just didn't receive any of the intervention that the intervention store had. So we collected a total of 8,395 observations. So we were staying with the area that long. And reliability was taken on 50% of those observations. And as you can see, our reliability was 85% of above, which is great when you're working with research assistants. So after excluding other and membership, because other means you didn't pay using a credit or debit card, and membership means you swipe your Panera card and your name popped up. So we excluded those purchases. After excluding those purchases, we had 3,141 purchases remaining of the original 8,395. So this is a kind of serious analysis of how data looked throughout the study, throughout the phases. So you can see during baseline, it's low for the intervention store and the control store. The intervention store is in red and control store is in blue. So blue you see is low throughout the study, but you see during the intervention and withdrawal phase at the intervention store, the cashier's ID checking behavior starts jumping up. And just to give you a clean picture, just a clear look at the data. So you can see the intervention store again, which is red. It started low at baseline, around about 2%, I guess. Then it jumps up to 37%. But then when we removed the prompts and then remind them to check ID, it fell to about 33%. So different from our original study, which it jumped up to 9.8 and fell back down to 2%. You can see just by including the store personnel, they helped them lead the study, that it jumped up well to 38%, which is bigger than the other study, but it kind of maintained a little bit. It didn't fall completely back to baseline, which is exciting. And plus, this is a low-cost intervention that any store can do, and it's more socially valid than our original study. So this is the chi-square analysis, looking at the data comparing the two sites. So at baseline between the two stores, there's not a significant difference. But during the intervention and withdrawal, you see a significant difference in the data between the two stores. And going back, as you can see, we couldn't get the cashier's ID checking behavior stabilized. And we was wondering why does the ID checking keep jumping up and down. And we noticed that it was a manager effect. So we went back and got the manager's hours that he worked, and he gave us his hours throughout the study. And we found why we couldn't keep the ID checking stable was because the manager, eventually he needed time to himself or he had to go away for training. So the manager went there for probably half of the intervention. So we got this neat graph where we get to see, but is it us there collecting data that influenced the data, or is it the manager there? And we see we have a manager effect here, holding the people accountable that kind of helps the data. But the manager there, you see the ID checking is 41% versus 27% with the manager not there. And the analysis there is significant. So the significance of the study is that, again, it's low cost, any store can do it. So if we can generalize here in Blacksburg, which Panera, I don't know what they're doing with the data now, because we just met a couple of days ago with the district manager, what they're doing with it, but it can be implemented in any store. So it's low cost, implemented in any store, either restaurant or going back to grocery and retail, or it can be implemented anywhere, and it can save a lot of people's identity from being stolen. But some limitations of our study is cashiers know most of the customers, and also cashiers doing multiple jobs. The cashiers also go make a juice for them. So here is my references and a cute little picture. So any questions?
Yeah, so I have a couple.
Go ahead.
You just said that one of your limitations was that the cashiers were no customers, right? So
Yeah.
like, why wouldn't you focus on like a department store, like a Best Buy or a Walmart, where it's just so many people that it's impossible to really know everything? Especially in an area like this, where it's a small town, right? And so they're regulars at most restaurants, but in a department store, like, there's no way they can reach know everything.
Well, I'm asked that two different ways. Well, one, because they wanted us to come in there and help and do the intervention, so it's kind of double dipping was one way. But and then answering it on another angle, even if you do retail, like you just mentioned, and it's a small town, so if you go to Best Buy and buy stuff, or you just go in there and ask questions here in Blacksburg, people would still know.
Well, so I understand that part, but like for the most part, no one really regularly shops at a store like that, right? You think about it, like it's
Right.
Just, so that was just like.
Well, this one we also had the 50% ID checking goal, because okay, we like probably half of the people there, so the other half you're not going to know, because again we surrounded by New River Valley Community College, Blacksburg, and Radford. So some of those it will be college students just coming in, so you probably won't know them. So this one we also had the 50% ID checking goal,
Okay.
which again they might know those customers, but for some retail, I think you will still find it in this town because it's such a small town.
Yeah, but I just thought, I would think it would be to a lesser degree, is all I'm saying. Like,
I mean, you might be right, it might be to a lesser degree, but most of the stores that I worked in, because I did actually work Sears before it closed, and I also worked Sears and I worked, Target for a little bit, but even in those, in Sears, I knew the customers after a month. But yeah, I get your point. Yeah, you don't get repeat customers, but you'll know most of the customers regardless of you work Best Buy, because you don't have just those repeat customers come through. And also with this study, one reason we did it that way because you self-swipe. The cashier self-swipe the card.
Right.
So what we found with our data during the customer side of it, that you're more likely to get your ID checked when the customer physically takes your card and swipe it, versus if you just go somewhere like Walmart or Best Buy and swipe your card yourself. And we found that during like 4 different iterations of the study. So this is why we focus on just the cashier swiping the card, because we're more likely to have impact rate there, because we're starting small and then trying to work our way up.
So like at a place like Kroger, did you all not focus on self-checkout, it was only the lines?
In Kroger, we focused on the lines, we didn't do self-checkout.
Okay.
Because then it kind of would defeat the purpose of the self-checkout, I guess.
And then, okay. And so
But at Kroger's, we just focused on the lines. And at Kroger's, their process was different from Panera, because at Panera, you go and swipe and you just get a receipt and go about your business. But at Kroger's, when we did it there, you swipe your card and you had to sign a receipt. So that was the time then that we could.
Did you control for debit cards as well?
Debit cards, no, we didn't control for debit or credit cards, which is not a good question because through the 4 different studies, even the prelim project I did with this, we did find difference between credit card and debit card.
Okay. Yeah, because that's based on, okay, that's what I was asking. And can you go back to the slide where you have the instructions? Like where it just says like 50% or whatever, that one?
With the sign,
Yeah, the sign.
that one.
So, this might be a minor thing, but I know like semantics matter a lot. So why did you not include like at least 50% of, right? Because like if you get a cashier who's just like 50% with every other customer, right? There's no motivation to really exceed that. It's just kind of like your turn. Right?
Well, you said at least 50?
Right.
Because our goal was 50%.
Okay.
So at least 50%. I mean, it's probably semantics, but the goal was this 50% goal, so we just wanted there, but they could do more. And we did have people to do more than 50%.
But you told them they could do more?
Yeah, they done more than, we had more people that done more than 50%. So that was just a reminder that, hey, we had this goal of 50%. So you could do more if you wanted.
Okay.
And some did less, as you can imagine.
Right.
So yeah, so they could do more. So yeah, like I said, it's semantics. So I guess at least 50 would probably be good in hindsight.
You know, most of us that spend all our money at Kroger's have the Kroger card, so we get gas credit and all that. And it seems to me that the stores who do that have a very good check on it because it also shows both your card ID for Kroger and your credit card code on your receipt. So there's a big percentage of their customers that I think you were excluding, where they've got the ideal checking system for fraud. I mean, it might take a follow-up, but at least they would be able to go back and retrace in a very good way, which isn't the case with, let's say, Walmart or something, where even if you know the customer, you often don't know them by name.
Right.
So the question then would be, does the cashier who knows its customers say, that's McNabb, that I know is a person plus the same name on the card? So I think there's a whole bunch of other interesting ramifications to the bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, this was just to try to explore
Oh,
like
of
different
course.
avenues, but yeah, I agree. This is why I said limitation is also they know people, so that would be because whatever store you go to. But like restaurants, yeah, rice goods have a point, but they probably know people more than the retail stores would. But like Walmart, we tried to do the study at Walmart, but Walmart was like,
Yeah,
no.
well, yeah, I assume like there was probably some corporate like problems with it. I wasn't saying that, I was just out offering a
Yeah, because before we even did the Kroger study was Walmart and Target we was trying to get into. But when we tried to talk to the manager at Target, we got, here, talk to corporate. And Walmart, the store manager was on board and he was like, wait a minute, we've been in the store for how many days? Like, no. And it's weird because I worked Sears and Walmart was the other store. And with Walmart, my cousin was one of the cashiers that got hit for identity theft there, a credit card fraud. And during Christmas, another cashier there, because somebody came in with like 3 credit cards, and one got declined, so she took the other card, got it swiped, that got declined, and swiped the third, and it went through, and they let it go through without any issues.
They didn't check her ID for those?
No.
Oh.
And again, I was working at the store when that happened. Even here in Sears, we had, thank God it's closed, we had a 12-year-old buy a refrigerator with his mom's credit card.
Oh,
Cause
did
it's-
you have a
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm on-
I did, yeah. Yeah, I was gonna kind of ask, so then what, you kind of touching upon it, but what are, like, so for these larger stores where obviously you mentioned the financial effect of credit card fraud if it hits a large company, why would larger companies not try to implement a policy where they say, check all customers' ID? Because of this, and then also what is their legal extent to where they have to, so just by requesting to check somebody's ID to make a credit card purchase, and a lot of cards say, on the back, it's valid if signed, is it, like, does one person have to have an ID on them, physically on their person, that you have to be able to check to deny a purchase? If someone just doesn't want to show you their ID, can the cashier say, then we can't process your purchase, or you have to present your ID?
Well, so when we done this, well, when we done it in Kroger, of course, we got people that did complain about that, like, how dare you? But at Panera, well, we had some at Kroger, how dare you? Some at Kroger was receptive to it, like, okay, I'll go back to my car. I actually seen somebody go back to the car and the cashier held up the line for them. And Panera, it was more welcome because you can imagine different atmosphere. They were more welcome to it, like, okay, I can go and get my car. But I think I lost a point that I was really making.
Yeah, just, do you know, is it like a legal requirement that if you're paying with a credit card that you have to show an ID?
Well, when you train on working serious in Walmart, and even when we had Matt Farnito here, he worked at Kroger, he was telling me that you're trained at Kroger to check for ID. Even at Panera, when we went there and talked to store manager, they're like, well, we teach our people to do it, but they really don't do it, and we want to figure out a way to make it stick. So you train, so what happened, you train, and once it happens in the company, going back, using the Walmart and Sears as an example, if you that cashier, then pretty much they call you in the office and be like, okay, this has happened, and we trained you to do this, it was in the CBL, so we have to let you go. I mean, this worst case scenarios, I know when it happened in Kroger's in South Main, like the guy was still there, Mr. Bill, he's still there. So it depends on how the company handles it.
That's interesting, very interesting. Thanks.